There's a sinister sense of satisfaction I get when taking a look at a game that is loved by its fans and was made by a committed developer who continued to support the game with new content years after release. I suppose the feeling is similar to what a gold-digging whore feels as she eyes up an upper-income 40-year-old family man, but you can't really blame a whore like myself for taking aim when the Mark divorced his first wife, Dead Island, for the younger woman. Dying Light. Before playing this game, I used to think Dying Light and Dead Island were part of the same universe. The only difference being this game has parkour, and Dead Island has a song about voodoo bitches. Apparently, Techland wanted to make a zombie game that sacrificed the humor in favor of a more bland, run-of-the-mill zombie story. I suppose they did get more competent game mechanics out of it, but that's up to each person respectfully to decide if that trade-off was worth it. With that said, feel free to tell me what a whore I am in the comments. I probably deserve it.
The eyes of the world have been glued to the city of Haran for the past 2 months, following the outbreak of a previously unknown pathogen.
The Exposition News Network really went all out on the production values for this report, but I feel that a report on a zombie outbreak in the Middle East should at least mention zombies once in said report. If you listen to the audio-only version, you might think it's no different from any other disease outbreak like coronavirus. God, if this video didn't come at the right time to be topical.
HUD activated. Commence briefing.
The mission briefing cannot be given until just moments before the agent is dropped into the mission area. It's not as if a high-altitude parachute jump requires Crane's concentration. I'm sure he can remember all that info as he watches the Earth get bigger and bigger beneath him.
The stolen file.
Jump in 10 seconds.
It details the incomplete process of synthesizing a cure for the virus. If implemented in its current state, the produced substance may be extremely toxic. Also, the file contains full description of the virion's structure. Any attempt to use it would result in countless lives lost. It must be recovered.
The GRE blocked all communication in and out of Haran to stop Qadir from linking a file to the public that contains a possible cure for the virus. Even if the virus cure was unfinished, it would hardly matter. The people trapped inside of Haran can't synthesize it themselves, since the city is overrun with zombies, and the other nations of the world would certainly test the cure in animal and human studies to ensure it worked before using it on anyone. The GRE regularly drops supplies into the city each day. Dropping Kyle into the city during daylight means any survivors in the area would be there when he landed expecting supplies, and finding him would blow his cover. The very moment Kyle lands on the ground, he gets mugged by 3 of Rais's men, cracked in the skull with a crowbar, and bitten by a zombie. I don't see what qualified Kyle for this solo mission. He doesn't have any special skills, and the one special skill he does have, parkour, he learns after arriving in the city. Jade fails to notice the uniform Kyle is wearing, or the fact that they found him beneath a dangling parachute, singling him out as not just some random survivor. After being bitten, Jade drags Kyle back to the tower and leaves him in a room with no one to watch him in case he turns. He gets woken up by kids no less.
Hey, I'm looking for the... Are you the boss?
Kyle is voiced by Roger Craig Smith, who just happened to voice Chris Redfield from Resident Evil, and Ezio Auditore from Assassin's Creed 2. And this just happens to be a game about zombies and parkour. There is no way his casting is just a coincidence.
Only thing Jade could salvage was your radio.
Oh, great. So can I get that back, please?
It was pretty fortunate that the GRE didn't try and radio Kyle while he was unconscious and Raheem was in possession of it.
That last guy I mentioned, he's only on the 13th floor, but he might as well be trapped in a mine cave-in.
One guy is trapped on the 13th floor by one zombie, and none of the people in the tower can deal with it except the new guy who has no experience and was hit in the head and bitten in his very first encounter with a zombie. Oh, that developing third world country sense of fun. I mean, what kind of elevator has a regular hinge door opening into it? That's a death trap. What if someone isn't paying attention and opens a door and walks through it while the elevator is on another level above them? I don't exactly have many complaints about the gameplay in Dying Light. It's a pretty simple combination that works. Take the first-person melee combat from Condemned and add it to the parkour mechanics from Mirror's Edge. I guess my only real complaint is that they didn't go far enough borrowing those mechanics. The first-person melee combat was done better in Condemned, and the parkour was also outdone by Mirror's Edge. However, not living up to better examples isn't a sin as long as the sum of its whole is a positive, even though you'll spend the first act of the game wondering why it takes 10 hits to the skull to kill a zombie. So I guess I'll take a sin off even though this comment sounded negative. However, I am going to sin them for all the tedious crafting and item collection I had to do. I think I performed more lockpicking minigames than in Oblivion and Skyrim combined, and there's no skill on the character tree to make them any faster.
Gauze and alcohol, huh? Pretty primitive, but it'll work.
Pretty primitive my ass. That's what they do in hospitals to disinfect a wound.
You're Jade, right?
Right.
That's a nice, traditional Middle Eastern name you have there, Jade. Oddly, despite this game being set in the Middle East, you come across no cultural references you would expect. Like Islam, the only religion you ever see is in the DLC, and it would be considered heretical by the region.
You want to feel right at home? A crane? On a crane.
I get that there is supposed to be some symbolism with Kyle's last name, but I just don't see what it is. Construction cranes don't make for a great metaphor.
Just do what I say, alright? Now, jump down to the very bottom.
Raheem's first lesson in parkour is to jump off a building into a pile of trash. That's not parkour. That's Jackass, the series. I can only assume those garbage bags are full of medical waste given the epidemic and how ubiquitous they are across the city. Jumping onto them to soften a landing would see Kyle getting up with several syringes sticking out of his back. One parkour lesson is all it takes to become a pro at running across the rooftops. If it were that easy, you would think the sport wouldn't have died out after a few years of being in the spotlight.
Raheem, what just happened to me?
Oh shit. I bet you're having your first seizure.
Raheem knew and expected Kyle to start having seizures, but still had him practice parkour by running over a construction crane between two towers.
So, I'm supposed to get a vaccine?
What? No. Suppressant. It's called Antizen. Suppresses the symptoms. Here, sit.
Kyle already knows what Antizen is. He parachuted in with a small supply of it, but that was crushed when he was attacked.
So, there's no cure?
It's a variation of rabies. There's no cure right now.
Your plot would be better off just having the zombie virus be a completely new disease. Once you tie it to rabies, the whole thing falls apart. For instance, rabies takes months to incubate before any symptoms appear, while this virus can turn a person in a matter of hours. And if this were a variation of rabies, it would also infect and turn animals as well. But the only thing it seems to work on are humans. And finally, if this were just an offshoot of rabies, then a vaccine would be that much easier to create since you could start with a rabies vaccine.
A cure is possible. Definitely possible.
One guy in a research trailer will somehow manage to find a cure for this disease while the entire world with all their biolabs and PhDs will fail.
I tried injecting recombined versions of the virus into chunks of meat and leaving them around the city, hoping some of the infected would eat them so I could observe and document the results.
But they didn't?
It bore no fruit.
Capturing a zombie and injecting them with a recombined virus wouldn't be that hard. How would you have even known which infected had eaten any of the meat if it had worked?
Now hurry. You still need to turn on the lights. That's the only way to make this place safe at night.
Quite a contraption you got here.
3 times brighter than an ordinary street lamp. Gives the infected quite the sunburn.
If UV lights can harm zombies, why isn't the sun straight up killing them? The sun gives off way more UV than a lamp.
Look, Brecken, the last thing we need is for you to go back out there. We can figure out another way without jeopardizing you.
The people in the tower don't want Brecken to go on more runs after last night when he received a head injury from Rise's men and lost his team to zombies. Poor baby. That never stopped them from sending Kyle on runs after he received a head injury and was infected.
No offense, friend, but you're as green as grass.
Kyle is as green as grass, but Brecken is the season leader who was jumped and nearly killed last night. The GRE are the ones dropping these relief packages into the city, and Rise's men are grabbing almost all of them. Rise is also the man that has the document the GRE want, so by dropping the relief packages, they have been aiding Rise the whole time.
Destroy it.
What? Why?
It will force interaction with Rais.
Despite being infected with the virus, Kyle only takes 1 vial of Antizen for himself before burning the rest so he can use the shortage to get closer to Rise. There's no reason he couldn't have pocketed a few more.
Now I give you a choice. Very simple. Your right hand or your left? Left.
Dying Light was edging a bit too close to Far Cry already, but I was okay with that since it was mostly doing a better job at being a Far Cry game than Far Cry itself. But then it came time to introduce the villain, Rais, who greets you by cutting off someone's hand while acting overly psychotic and antagonistic, and it certainly doesn't help the comparison when the first thing he has Kyle do for him is climb up a radio tower. I'm curious about how the GRE is stopping radio broadcasts from leaving the city while allowing radios to still function inside the quarantine sector when you jam the spectrum. It's pretty indiscriminate.
The imposing of one's will, the creation of one's own rules, that is what makes a man. Do you live by your own rules, Crane? Or are you merely someone else's puppet?
You're not exactly Andrew Ryan. You can't make this argument when you need people to follow orders. Rais is a warlord after all. His philosophy is in direct contradiction of all the people who follow him.
But bear in mind, not everyone you talk to today will be in a cooperative state of mind. Here's your money. Take it.
What good is money in a city cut off from the rest of the world? And what service is Rais providing that they need to pay for? I assume it's protection money, but Rise's men don't seem to be doing any of that. Rais was introduced with a maiming. I thought that fulfilled the game's lackluster villain establishment scene already. It didn't have to sell it even harder by having Rais shoot one of his own men to prove what a bastard he is.
Your loyalty to the tower is nothing but blind obedience, Crane. A coward's submission to false hierarchies. You follow their rules as thoughtlessly as you follow mine.
Rais berates Kyle for doing what others tell him to do, but then he kills his own men when they don't do what he tells them to. So it doesn't seem that it matters whether you do what Rais says or not.
You promised me 2 crates of it. This is only 5 vials.
If you want more, I present you with an opportunity. The athlete, the Scorpion, Jade Aldemir. She's one of your number. Bring her to me.
How could Rais expect Kyle to trust him to keep his word? He just made it clear he has no respect for people who follow orders.
Give it to me.
So what happened?
One person turned and had a couple of other people trapped. We could have sealed off that one apartment, but Brecken wanted to save as many lives as possible.
Again, how is one zombie in the tower that big of a deal? Kyle deals with entire streets of them at a time.
I'm no leader. I'm a goddamn parkour instructor!
Yeah, I would have to question a person's leadership abilities if they believed they could sell parkour lessons in 2015.
How much you had to drink, kid?
Can I or not?
Yeah. What's up?
See that skyscraper? Scouts from the Volatile nest in there.
Drunkenness is often used to make a character open up and reveal something new about themselves. We already knew Raheem wants to destroy the Volatile nest. This scene exists only to redraw the roadmap to his death and the conflict with Jade.
Resuming the airdrops would not be politically advantageous at the moment.
Under what circumstances would it be politically disadvantageous to continue airdropping supplies to survivors?
Something is going on at the school. Tahir's men have been hauling boxes out of that place for hours.
If his men are hauling boxes out of it, then it stands to reason they are moving the Antizen, and one of you might want to follow that instead of going inside. The only method this game has for making sure the player remembers a villain is having him kill someone in front of Kyle.
Give me a hand here, would you?
It helps if you undo the latches from the crate instead of prying it open with a crowbar.
That's plastic explosives, right?
This was an aid package dropped by the GRE into the quarantine to help survivors. Why would they figure the survivors would need high explosives, which could be used to blow a hole in the quarantine wall?
Promise me you won't let Raheem near that height.
What?
Jade makes Kyle promise to keep the explosives away from Raheem. If Jade has the explosives, she should be the one to keep Raheem away from the explosives.
Crane, Saeed told me about the explosives you guys found. How perfect is that? Jade gave them to him. Saeed used to be on a bomb squad.
After the mission, Saeed tells Raheem about the explosives, meaning he either ignored explicit instructions from Jade, or Jade forgot to mention that detail to Saeed. Either way, we're going to get an angry Jade blaming her brother's death on Kyle when it's just as much her fault as anybody else's.
But if these creatures favor areas where I left my experimental bait, well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Please do obtain a sample, but it has to be fresh.
How is Kyle supposed to get a fresh meat sample from something that is already dead?
When I dose the meat samples with the altered strain, it's had an effect. This could explain all the different mutations.
I fail to see how your tainted meat causing further mutations in the virus that led to more volatile zombies is a good thing. This zombie science is sounding as scientific as homeopathy.
No way to get the research to him.
Well, you can talk to him on the radio. Why not share the info that way?
There's too much data, Crane. It would take years.
What do you mean, too much data? Zera just looked under the microscope at the sample and saw what he hoped to see. He hasn't even performed a data analysis on it yet.
Raheem, that was my job!
Oh, right, because you're more qualified to handle explosives than I am. You're just a goddamn tourist. But listen, we messed up.
Raheem acts indignant over that insinuation, then reveals how he screwed up and he is about to die unless someone comes and saves him.
Crane, I didn't think I'd make it, so I armed the bombs. They'll blow in less than 5 minutes.
Why wouldn't the bombs have an off switch? Why would they even have a timer instead of a remote detonator? You were going to place these inside of a building with nothing but zombies in it, so there was no need to worry about someone disarming them. Without Antizen to suppress the infection, a person will turn in just a few hours. Raheem was bitten just a few minutes ago when he tried to sneak into the nest, so there wouldn't have been enough time for him to turn.
Look, he was my friend, too. He was the best one I had here.
Kyle says that Raheem was his best friend in the tower, and I've got to go with, was he? Because he just seemed like a teenager with a one-track mind that helped you in the tutorial level. Kyle got along with Jade way better than with her brother.
I trusted him. I trusted him with those explosives, God.
You never trusted him with the explosives. Kyle let Jade take them back to the tower, and she trusted them to Saeed, who then gave them to Rahid after making timers for them. And Jade puts all the weight of this on Kyle's shoulders, even though she was just as responsible by being the one who suggested raiding the school, and then turned the explosives over to someone else rather than hiding them. I need to point out that blowing up the nest changed nothing. There are still zombies everywhere and volatiles come out at night. Rahid died for nothing. Rise's men attack Zair's trailer and take him away. Rais couldn't have known about Zair's recent success on the cure, but that's why Rais had him taken. Turning out the lights is all it takes to get one over on Kyle. But seeing that none of Rise's men are wearing night vision, I don't see how they were able to see in the dark to pull it off.
My research, it must reach Dr. Camden. That's why I gave the packages to Jade.
It takes no more than a false hope of rescue to loosen the good doctor's lips.
Rais expected someone would come to rescue Zair and use that opportunity to find out what he did with the research since Zair wasn't talking. You can't really expect a captured person to spill the important information the moment the rescuer shows up. And I didn't see Rais or his men within listening distance when Zair told Kyle he gave the research data to Jade to deliver to Dr. Camden in Sector 0. This is Rais' third time killing his own men. After this, I think one of them would have half a mind to shoot Rais after he tosses the gun to make sure their own moment is being made an example never happens. No reaction at all from those men on the same scaffolding that was nearly knocked over by the crate with a giant zombie inside it. Why give Kyle a medkit? Rais descends to the arena floor to have his men shoot Kyle after he picks it up.
Lower the platform!
I mean, I could safely rub your face in your failure from up here, but I'd rather do it within arm's reach after watching you kill a legion of zombies, including one the size of a truck.
Chaos, Crane. Chaos is the one true order of things. But to pretend otherwise is the sheerest folly.
If that's the case, why do you impose order on your own men and those trapped inside of Haran? Being a violent authoritarian warlord is the polar opposite of chaos.
Bassam, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Publish the file.
The GRE should have thought twice about sending Kyle in with the one radio that could get through the signal jamming, allowing Rais to publish the file they were hoping to keep secret.
The GRE plans to weaponize the virus, not cure it.
Releasing the file means Rais no longer has any leverage over the GRE. They might as well go ahead with a bombing plan to wipe out the virus in order to cover up the report that they wanted to weaponize it.
Kill him.
Rais should have given that order before getting within kissing distance of Kyle. He apparently didn't learn his lesson from 5 minutes ago when Kyle broke free from 2 of his men and punched Rais in the face. And Rais's men apparently didn't learn the lesson to be careful around Kyle after Rais shot 2 of them for messing up, because these 2 moved closer to Kyle like they're not pointing rifles at his face. This one guard was like, oh man, my boss that kills his own men is getting cut up. I better shove a knife in that old man he wants to keep alive before shooting at Kyle. If you were going to have your villain loudly yell the name of the hero, at least cell shade your game so I can pretend it's for children. Here we have your basic injured and can only walk slowly segment. If Rais is looking for Kyle, he would likely raid the tower and kill everyone there, but he never does. An odd bit of restraint for a remorseless madman.
Here's your gear. Best regards from Kareem.
One of Rais's men, Kareem, who Kyle befriended during the radio tower mission, sends all of Kyle's stuff back to him despite the risk. I guess all those times Rais killed his own men are just not having the effect he was hoping for.
There's a group called the Saviors that smuggles people through.
There's a group in the sewer that smuggle people into the other part of the quarantine zone called Sector 0. Normally, you smuggle people from one dangerous place to a safer location. Sector 0 is no different from this one, and in fact it's more dangerous due to more infected.
Sorry, but I had no choice. Rais has me by the balls.
The smugglers end up selling Kyle out to Rais, however, but rather than putting a bullet in him while his back was turned, they wait until Kyle is on his own halfway through the sewer to contact him over the radio to tell him that they are selling him out.
But the thing is, the GRE hired me, alright? I was supposed to find out where Rais sent this classified file, but that doesn't matter anymore because the Ministry contacted me. Jade, they were going to firebomb the city.
Troy helps Kyle contact Jade, and he levels with her that he was actually working for the GRE to find Rais. But now the GRE are going to level the city. She then gets even angrier at him and ends the call, meaning I guess she doesn't care about that bombing the city part as long as she gets to pout through it.
Savvy broke through the jamming and I think you better get back here. You have to see this.
You better take a look at this cliché. And to make it even worse, it's just a news report confirming what Kyle already knew and told him earlier about the upcoming bombing.
I was the last survivor left in the quarantine. I can't believe I made it out.
If Savi figured out a way through the signal jamming to download this news broadcast, then he should be able to send messages to the outside as well, letting the world know that there are still survivors inside the quarantine and halting the bombing.
We were going to plant explosives in a building and set off fires in a pattern. Something the zombies could never do.
Wow, you really figured out a way to overcomplicate a signal fire. You do realize that the emoji you created by setting off gas explosions in the apartments will be short-lived. The fire will spread to other rooms and make it look like a normal burning building in minutes. Rais has become fixated on Kyle for really no compelling reason. He grabbed Jade and left a message to lure Kyle to the museum so he can kill him there while monologuing. If he wanted Kyle dead and the research Jade had, he could have just waited until they met up in this room and ambushed them there together instead of grabbing Jade alone.
You'd be walking into a massive trap.
No, It's not subtle enough to be a trap.
Rais is using Jade as bait to get Kyle to come to the museum. That's pretty clearly a trap. But Kyle goes to all the trouble swimming through flooded tunnels to sneak in and still gets taken by surprise anyway.
You cannot simply demand to have her, Crane. You must make a showing of effort first.
This is the exact same thing Rais did last time to Kyle. Stick him inside a death pit so zombies can attack him.
Now that I have Zera's research, the GRE will do as I commanded.
That's a tad presumptuous. The GRE didn't exactly sound convinced that Zera's research could amount to anything, and how would they know Rais is even telling the truth about having it?
Once again, you find yourself with a choice, Crane. Your precious Scorpion is about to turn, but so are you.
When exactly did Rais learn that Kyle was infected? Kyle never mentioned it or showed signs of it in front of Rais, and he certainly couldn't have predicted that Kyle was near turning. Kyle himself didn't even know that. In fact, it seems like they just made him start convulsing right now after Rais said this to prove the point.
Who will receive the Antizen?
Here's an idea. Don't throw them any Antizen and watch them both turn into zombies. Why is Rais so fixated on teaching his philosophy to a man he plans to kill anyway?
Jade, here. You take this. No, come on. Listen, I've still got some in my system. You need this worse than I do.
I recall Kyle pocketing a vial of Antizen earlier in the game that he never used. Now might be a good time. So is this what everyone experiences before they turn into a zombie? This is more like a DMT experience.
For a while I blamed you for Amir's death. I wanted to kill you.
So is Jade just running around yelling her backstory at Kyle while he has a fever dream? I can't think of any other way to explain her part in this sequence.
You and you. Get in there and kill them.
Maybe you should kill Kyle yourself, since things don't tend to go well when you delegate.
Tahir! Kill that son of a bitch!
Tahir makes for a better final boss fight than we are going to receive.
Guess Rais must have dropped it when he was trying not to get shot, huh?
No one tried to shoot Rais to make him accidentally drop it. He sent his men down here to kill Kyle after Jade died and then left. Zera's research is Rais' only trump card now. Why would he leave without it?
You need to install it at the highest place possible. That way we'll have the best chance to break through.
Okay, so let me guess. I need to head out to that giant antenna tower at the edge of town?
One radio tower mission is never enough for this type of open world game.
There are still survivors inside the walls! They plan to firebomb Haran!
Earlier, those same pilots destroyed the signal fire Kyle set in the apartment building to cover up the fact that there were still survivors, so they would have known then that there were still people alive in the city. Now when they hear Kyle over the radio, they go against their orders and call off the carpet bombing mission.
It still stands as a monument to chaos, to entropy, to what it means to be ruled only by oneself.
I really wish Rais would keep his philosophical musings to himself and his Ayn Rand Facebook group.
Come, Crane. Come and challenge me.
Rais is waiting on his tower for a GRE helicopter to come pick him up. He has no reason to bait Kyle into a showdown. He could just leave with Zera's data and be done with it.
Imagine the damage I shall be able to do outside the confines of these walls.
I think Rais would actually be rather limited in the damage he could do outside of the quarantine. Laws and police forces tend to prevent lawless chaos from being as effective. Rais shot his right-hand man and somehow infected all of his men with the virus. This is a case of a villain killing all of his men to prove that he's a bastard. Kyle having a finale on and around Industrial Crane seems a little too on the nose for me, and I still don't get what the symbolism is supposed to be meant for. Impressive that Rais can fire a rocket launcher when he only has the one hand. The final boss fight is nothing but a series of QuickTime events. When you went through the trouble of creating a detailed melee fighting system, why would you opt for this?
Just as you killed Tahir. Do it!
When Kyle had Tahir in a similar situation, he reasoned that leaving a loose end like Tahir around would be a mistake and killed him. That proved to be the right call then, because as soon as Kyle turns his back on Rais, he gets knocked off the building.
Hand me the disc, so that there is at least a chance that Haran might live. And I will make your death painless.
You will make his death painless by loosening his grip so he falls. I'm pretty sure Kyle can do that on his own by letting go. At least he stabbed Rais in the vocal cords.
You need the cure. It's here, in the city, somewhere. And as long as it is, you won't try to pull any ministry-style bullshit.
The GRE might be corrupt, but I think they have a better chance of using the data to cure the virus than one guy in a lab stuck inside the quarantine. You would still need production facilities and people to distribute it.
The analysis just finished on the tissue samples. The results are... well, I don't think the word phenomenal is too strong. Crane, if you can recover Zera's data, I'm certain a cure is within reach.
I think phenomenal is too strong of a word, because given the plot of the DLC and the fact that the sequel is set years later when the world is overrun by the virus, Camden clearly failed to create a cure from Zera's data.
I got a zombie army, and you can't harm me. Yeah, who do you, bitch?